Welcome to the channel, guys. My name is Charlie, and in this video I want to show you a short clip I put together using the GoPro Hero 9 and share 5 easy tips I used that you can use to instantly make your GoPro footage look more cinematic. So with that, let's get right to it. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I had a lot of fun making it, and I think that it turned out even better than I was hoping for it to. So now I'm gonna go over the 5 things I did to this footage to make it look more cinematic. Tip number 1, and the most obvious and important thing to do, is to make sure you set your camera up with the right settings. If you're not recording the video correctly, doesn't matter what you're gonna do to it, it's gonna look pretty bad. Now this is not difficult, it's really easy. On the GoPro, there's actually only really a couple settings that you need to mess with, and I'm gonna go over what I used to set up this video. I think the most important settings you need to pay attention to are your resolution and your frame rate. For all this footage, I shot it in 5K, and I used either 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second. And the reason for this is when I was doing the driving footage and I had this thing mounted to the back of a car, I shot it in 30 frames a second so that I had the ability to slow it down by 20%, which helped smooth it out even more. But for everything else that you're shooting, in general, you want to shoot in 24 frames per second. And in the GoPro settings, you also have a choice of what lens you're going to use. For all this footage, I used the linear lens because it allowed me to use the horizon leveling feature that this GoPro has, and it's amazing. It was just wide enough to fill the frame how I wanted to, but that horizon leveling meant that no matter how it bounced around, it kept the frame perfectly level. Now, with a GoPro, you obviously can use their wide angle lens and capture huge shots. But if you do decide to do that, that's gonna lead to tip number 2, which is to correct the fisheye effect that the GoPro has. Now, I didn't use it much in this footage, but if you do decide to shoot something with the GoPro using the wide lens, you're gonna wanna make sure that you undo that fisheye effect in post. To do this in Final Cut Pro, which is the editing software that I use, we're actually going to add a fisheye effect to each of the clips that you use this lens on. This might sound counterintuitive, but what we're actually gonna do is add a negative value to this fisheye effect, which is gonna undo that warping a little bit. Now, this is not an exact science, but pretty much all you need to do is pick a feature or an object in your clips that you know should be level and adjust that negative number until the curve straightens out. It's really not that difficult, but I promise it makes the footage look so much better when you don't have that warping at the edges of your image. Now, tip number 3 is to color grade and add filters to your footage. And this is where the fun really starts, because now at this point, you should have pretty good looking clips, but now we just want to add character to it and make it look more cinematic. Now, color grading might sound really difficult, especially if you're newer to photography like I am, but it's really not as bad as it sounds. And there's so many resources on YouTube alone already that go way more in depth about it. But the basics really are just you want to correct your exposure and then add a few filters to give it a more stylized effect. For these clips, it was really simple. All I did was make sure that the highlights and the shadows were properly exposed, and then I added a lookup table, or LUT, to all the clips that complemented the GoPro color profile nicely and gave it a more cinematic look to it. There's tons of LUTs online you can download. There's free ones, there's paid ones. I actually have been using the Peter McKinnon LUTs for a while now, and I think they look really good, and they're really, really easy to just slap on clips, and they just look good right off the bat. Tip number 4 is sound design. Now, this is a little difficult with GoPros because the built-in microphone is pretty terrible, but to get around this, I bought and highly recommend the media mod for the Hero 9. Now, this helps in 2 ways. The first obvious way is that it has a better built-in microphone now that has forward and rearward facing mics and a nice built-in windscreen. But the main reason why I bought the media mod is because it has a mount and an input for external microphones. So I can use these Rode microphones that I use all the time, and it doesn't matter what camera I use, I always have the same audio. But as you can tell in the video, there's a lot of these clips that don't have much sound to them. So for the rest of the clips, I just removed the audio altogether. Don't leave audio that's not contributing to your video in the video. So when I was driving, a lot of this was just distracting wind noise. So you just want to cut that out. Only when you want to hear something should you keep the audio in your tracks. And then lastly, you obviously want to add music that complements the vibe of your video. And you want to make sure you cut your clips together on the beats of whatever music you're using. Lastly, tip number 5, and this is the easiest tip of all of them, and that's just to add a letterbox to the video. It's so simple. I can't explain why it looks good. I'm sure there's some scientific reason as to why we like it, but just adding a letterbox, which are those black bars that go across the top and the bottom, make the footage look so much more cinematic. In Final Cut Pro, there's an effect called letterbox. You can just add that effect to every clip and set what aspect ratio you want those bars to cut the film off at. I use the 2.34:1 aspect ratio letterbox for all of these clips, but you can feel free to use any of the other aspect ratios, test them out, try them out, and see which one looks best for your clips. Well, those are the 5 things I did to this GoPro footage to make it look more cinematic. So hopefully you can take those and use those in your creative ways to make your footage look even better. If you enjoyed this, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I hope you got something out of it and something that you can use in your footage to make it look even better. Till next time.